Friends, welcome to Leading Theologically. I'm your host, Zoë Garry. It is my pleasure to serve at the Presbyterian Foundation as the Associate Director for Theological Education Fund's development. In this role, I get to work with our Presbyterian seminaries, churches, and partner organizations that are invested in supporting theological education. For this season, we will be exploring discernment and the vital role it plays in our faith and our lives. Big things are happening in our world and in our lives, and from that, big questions form that are asked of ourselves and our community. For this reason, this season, we'll focus on the different aspects of discernment. Our guest today is Reverend Tim Yee. Tim is currently the youth pastor at Community Church of Seattle in Seattle, Washington. Welcome, Tim.
Hi.
So I met Tim earlier this year in Seattle, and I just remember when we were talking at lunch, I had this thought, like, man, I wish someone was recording our conversation. You have such thoughtful insights and great energy, and so I'm thrilled to welcome you this season.
Thanks for having me on, Zoe. Yeah, I really loved our time together. I think we went out and we got Thai, which is really, really delicious in the heart of Seattle. And yeah, we had a really good time, and it's awesome that we get to connect again after that lunch meeting. So thanks for having me on.
Baseline Thai.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So thanks for joining me. I'm so glad you're here. So just to start off, I'd love to start with the question, at what point in your ministry did discernment become an important practice?
Yeah. So just really quickly, like as you mentioned, I'm a youth pastor out in Seattle, and I've been in youth ministry for over 15 years now. I'm entering my fourth year here in Seattle, and then the other was actually out in the East Coast in New Jersey. And so I think every minister and every pastor that goes into ministry, I'm sure you've experienced this, but you go in with a lot of energy and a lot of excitement, and you just have all these like ideals and like visions that you want to come to fruition. But then you kind of like hit like this reality wall where
Mm-hmm.
ministry is really not what you expected it to be, right? And so I think your expectation doesn't match your reality. And so for me, that was really discouraging. It was, disheartening, especially in youth. Like you would put in all this effort and time and energy into planning all these events, and then
Mm-hmm.
like one or two students show up, or sometimes zero students sign up. And so that's really discouraging, and it's
Mm-hmm.
really disheartening. And so I think, the hardships of ministry was really humbling, because you realize, wow, like all the things that you hadn't planned didn't work out the way that you expected it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a really humbling experience. And so, looking back, I don't think there was like a specific moment where discernment became very important to me. But kind of in hindsight, I've realized that it was actually in my hardest moments. It
Mm-hmm.
was in the disappointment, it was in the discouraging seasons of ministry where I realized, wow, it's not about how smart I am. It's not about how
Yeah.
talented I am. It doesn't even matter how well you plan, although those things are important. But
Mm-hmm.
I think you realize, wow, there's something bigger than myself, that I can't do this on my own. And so that's when I started seeking, mentors, wise counsel, and discernment. And I realized, okay, maybe I'm not the MVP that I thought I was going to be. And so, at least for me, in my context, in my story, it was in the discouraging moments, the valleys, where
Mm-hmm.
I sought out discernment and wisdom, not from myself, but obviously from God, but also from, the trusted people that I have in my life. And so, yeah, it's in those moments where, uh, when you're humbled, that you kind of seek out the discernment and the wisdom from other people. And so that kind of changed the way that I do ministry. And again, I'm not saying that I'm a perfect example of it, but it is
Mhm.
something that I'm learning and growing from.
Yeah, I really like how in those tougher moments of in that kind of humility, you did have to ask those questions, right? Like, why isn't this working? Or is this where I'm supposed to be? Or am I doing the right thing? And then from those questions, you had to reach out to your support, your mentors, and all of that, showing that kind of at that center are those questions, but also those partners that help you answer them or encourage you to ask them.
Yeah, and I think sometimes like I even question my own like calling in those
Yeah.
difficult moments. I even question my own talents. Like, is this really for me? Like, are kids
Mhm.
actually listening to my sermon? Like, do they even like me? And so there was a lot of those thoughts going on.
Yeah.
And so I'm thankful for those moments where, people would speak life into me and truth into me,
Mhm.
saying, hey, like, we all go through that, right? And I
Yeah.
think I was able to go through those hard seasons of ministry because of the voices and the people that I sought out. So yeah, so grateful for those people in my life.
That's and having those people are so important. So
Hmm.
thinking of your role as a youth leader, like you aren't doing it alone, right? Like
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
have a huge amount of youth in your ministry and also quite a few adult volunteers, correct?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Uh,
So as a youth leader, when you are looking, what are some of the things that you look for in adult leaders to help navigate students? Knowing how important it is to have those people around you, that it's not just you in these students' lives, that you are also creating all of these other adult leaders and volunteers in this youth group. What are the things that you look for to help these students? What do you look for in adult
mm.
leaders to help navigate students in such a formative time in their life?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I came to faith in my high school years. And so for me, youth group was
Really?
very formative. I don't know if it is for you, but at
Yeah.
least the people that I talk to in my circles, a lot of them talk about their positive experiences that they had in the education department, whether it be children's ministry, youth, or college. And so for me, I think that's very formative. That's where, students, their minds and their hearts are very malleable. And so you
Yeah.
could really form them and shape them to become more like Christ and, lead them
Mhm.
towards the right path. And so because it's so important, the leaders are just as important in that
Yes.
in that journey. I really do believe God uses people in the church to guide and coach our students. And so, because it's such an important position to me,
Mhm.
when it comes to finding youth leaders, I think number one definitely is, faith. I think that's a given. Um, is there a track record of them having a close encounter, a deep personal relationship with God? I think faith is kind of baseline. But other than that, I think definitely consistency is very important. I would say,
Absolutely.
yeah, consistency is so important.
Yeah.
Much more important than teachers having passion or intensity. I think consistency
Mm.
is really what shows students that they care and that they
Mhm.
matter. Um, if you think about the school year, there's about 52 Sundays in one year. And
Yeah.
so in youth ministry, at best, you'll probably have anywhere from like 45 to 50 hours with your students in a
Wow.
given week, right? Because, typically Sunday
Yeah.
service is an hour. And then if you have like a couple events throughout the week, it's not a lot of hours, in an
Mhm.
entire year. And so I always tell my teachers, if you want to be part of our youth ministry, your presence matters way
Mhm.
more than what you can say. I mean, that's important too, but showing up is really, I would say, 80% of youth ministry because it shows students that they care. And I think when I first came out to Seattle, one of the heartbreaking things that I've heard from my students was, "Hey Tim, how long are you going to stay here?"
Mm.
Because before I came, they've had youth pastors and teachers kind of come in for like a couple
Mhm.
months, maybe a year, and then there will be a whole new change. And so I think for the
Wow.
students, that was their experience. And because of that, that made them more hesitant in trusting the church and, any
Mhm.
teachers and leaders. Again, not because of what anything bad that they've encountered, but there was kind of, a rotating cycle of people coming in and out. And so I think that
Mhm.
kind of affected them. And so whenever I try to recruit my teachers, it's like, hey, just show up, right? Show up, man. Even if it's like for 30 or 40 minutes, just come say hello. Just because that really does matter, and it shows the students that they care. And I think another one is teachability. I try to
Yes.
kind of gauge their heart, and what I mean by teachability is not so much can they learn like new strategies and new ways of reaching the youth, although that's important, but teachability more in the sense of, are they willing and are they open to learning from the students themselves?
Wow. Yeah.
I think as we kind of get older, and I kind of see this in myself too, as you
Yeah.
get older, you think you have all this like wisdom and knowledge, like, oh, I'm going to teach all these students XYZ. I'm going to teach them all these mistakes. And I think that's good. I think wisdom is needed. But at the same
Mhm.
time, too, do they have an openness in realizing, hey, sometimes students can teach us about God. We
Yeah.
don't, have all the information and knowledge about God. Students can teach us and they can lead us and they can guide us. And so, is there kind of like that humility in the
Mhm.
hearts um, to students teaching them about God? And I think that's
Yeah.
really important, right? Having that humble posture. And lastly, they just got to be relatable. Are they fun? Again, they don't have to throw parties or anything, but can they
Actually,
tell a
oh, you have to throw parties.
I
No, I'm
know.
kidding.
Yeah, like, can you tell a corny joke? Like, I love
Yeah,
corny
yeah, yeah,
jokes. Like,
yeah,
and so I think just relatability, it doesn't matter how old or how young you are. I think
yeah,
kids will naturally gravitate towards people that they like. And so
mhm,
that's a huge part of it. Can they have fun? Can they joke with them?
yeah,
Can they, hang out with them after Sundays? And so, yeah, those are just some of the things that I look for in a youth leader. And
yeah.
again, I don't make, sometimes I don't make the right decisions, but it's a learning experience. It's a process.
I love those.
Mm,
And I think that the latter two are really about building the relationship. Like,
hmm.
are you like, can you learn from the students really shows, like, are you actually willing to have a two-way relationship with these
Yes, that's
students?
important.
I think that that's really cool. And then the consistency part is so important for me because for two reasons. One, so easy. Everyone can be consistent. Like, that is not, you're not asking someone to move a mountain. You are
Mm,
asking someone to show up. And I think that almost every single person has it in their power to be able to be consistent. So it's just accessible. And then two, it really pours into building that trust.
mm.
Like you said, students do go through so much transition. Like, every year they have new teachers, new classrooms, new material, and new leaders in church. And so, what is a way that they can trust this environment? And consistency could be part of that.
Yeah,
Um,
100%. Mm.
yeah. So what are some other aspects of trust that you help build in your community? So consistency is clearly one of them, but what else do you need to be able to build trust in your community so you can have these deep, vulnerable conversations?
Yeah. Um, I think going back to consistency, I think
Yeah.
consistency is more than just you showing up and having a
Mhm.
physical presence. I think that's important because, again, like you mentioned, students are always in transition every single year to new grade, new teachers, new classes. And so the fact that teachers show up offers, a sense of stability, which I
Yeah.
think students need. And I would just kind of add on to that. So not only consistency in your physical presence, but also consistency in your character. And so I think a big thing is genuine and authenticity. I think that's kind of a
Mm,
word that's kind of being thrown a lot. And I think for good measure too. I think with the rise of social media, it's so
mm,
easy to kind of put on a persona
yeah.
and curate a certain personality to the rest of the world. And
Mhm,
so I think because of social media, I think what kids are looking more of is like just genuine
mhm,
sincerity, relationships. Like, is this person, can I trust this person? Is this person genuine and authentic? Or are they pretending? And so I think having that consistency in how you treat people and
yeah,
just being genuine and authentic and just being yourself at the end of the day, I think that's really what students are craving. Is, hey, like, is the person that's in front of me a real person, right?
yeah.
Because again, like, there's so much like AI and all these different
Mhm,
technologies, and it's so hard to tell what's real and what's fake. And I think one of the things that the church can offer is that real, genuine human connection. And it
abs-
really comes down to consistency, more than just your physical presence, but are you consistent in your character? Are you consistent in your behavior? Are you going to do what you say that you're going to do? And so I think just being honest and just being yourself is kind of the greatest asset that we have
yeah.
as a church, especially to youth ministry.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that hunger for authenticity
Hmm,
is
hmm.
is so there. So you mentioned online presence and what social media does. So I'd like to just tap into that a little bit because you have a pretty significant online presence. So you have tens of thousands of people who follow your YouTube channel and you have been able to create a presence online. Um which has the online sphere, social media does have inauthentic parts of it, but it also is does have some authenticity and it is a real place, I guess. So I feel when social media was just starting, when I was in high school and college, people were just like, this is fake, this isn't real. But it is. Like there are very real things that happen online. And it deeply affects our lives and our students' lives. You know, so how do you navigate online spaces and in-person spaces differently to have these meaningful conversations? Because you do that
Hmm.
on your YouTube channel. So what are the ways that you kind of create or try and have that consistency and authenticity both in person and online?
Yeah, th this is actually a pretty hard question because I'm still figuring it out, as we
Yeah.
go. This is still very new and foreign to me.
Mhm.
Social media and online ministry, it came a long way. I remember MySpace and Facebook was like the big thing back in the day. And so it's always evolving. And so for me, even though I am on YouTube, but I still struggle as well. Like, I'm
Mm.
navigating and I'm learning, as we go. But I would agree there are moments where, yeah, online ministry can be authentic, it can be genuine, but it is harder to find because I think online ministry, the beauty of it is that you could reach a wide audience, at just a click of
Mhm.
a button and you can go viral. And so there's always that hidden desire for most people to want to reach a wide group of people, even if it's not genuine and authentic. And so that's kind of the limits. But when it
Mm.
comes to connecting and fostering meaningful relationships, again, I'm still trying to figure it out. But what I worked for me in my context is, uh, the beauty of it is that you could answer certain questions and have certain conversations, that you can't necessarily have on the pulpit because pulpit, you only have like 30 to 40 minutes, but
Mhm.
you can talk about certain topics and conversations, in more detail, online, throughout the week. And so that's something that has been an advantage for
Mhm.
me. is, certain topics that people are curious about,
Hmm.
you could just address it right there and then, right? Yes, I still
Yeah.
had to do my research, I still had to do my homework, but I can, communicate it in a way where uh, it appeals to a large group of people. And I think that's the beauty of it. You can reach people who would never step foot into a church, but because of a
Mm.
certain topic or a certain video,
Hmm.
that will be kind of their first exposure
Wow.
to Christianity. And so, in that sense, it's meaningful, right? You can
Hmm.
reach a wide group of people with the message of Jesus, to people who necessarily wouldn't step foot physically inside a church. And so, I think the front doors of a church kind of has been widened a little bit, which is
Mm.
great. Um, but the downside is that it is a bit harder to kind of have that human connection, which I think is important too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and so I think that's why the in-person connection, the advantage of that is you can, go a bit deeper, right? You can
Hmm.
have those human connections, the in the flesh moments that you can't necessarily duplicate online. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question. I'm still kind of navigating it as well. Like, what's the, is there room for both online and in person? And I would say yes. I would say yes, there is. Because if you think about even the Bible, right? It's letters that was written 2,000 years ago, but it's still influencing, billions of people
So
today. And I think online ministry is just kind of the next step. Not saying that it's
it's an
canonical,
aspect.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, but
Yeah.
it can be utilized to reach many. So
Yeah, and I think we have to be honest about how accessible it is,
yeah.
um, for people who wouldn't feel comfortable going to a church or have never been to one, but might have had these curiosities and finally do have access to get some answers. So thinking about the curation that goes into these videos online, there's a lot of intentionality, there's a lot of editing. But going back to this in-person aspect, how much curation do you have to do in conversations around discernment with your youth? Does it
Mm.
come naturally, or do you have to create really intentional spaces and conversations for it?
Yeah. Um, just to kind of clarify, curation, do you mean like kind of like filtering or just providing certain guidelines? Is that kind of where
Um,
you're go?
when I think of like curation, I think more of creation.
Oh, okay.
So like having one like a retreat or one youth group specifically on the topic, or a one-on-one coffee meeting with students. Like, is there a considerable intentionality around these conversations of discernment with your
hmm
students, or do you find that it comes more naturally because of the trust and the relationships that you've built with
Yeah,
them?
I think it all comes back to the consistency and trust. I
Mhm,
think without any of that relationship building, you're not gonna have, these type of discussions and conversations that the youth are having. But I think what I've noticed, at least in my context, in the Asian American,
mhm,
context, what I've seen is there is more of an openness and a willingness to talk about certain topics that were
mm,
considered not so much taboo, but you didn't really talk about it openly in public, 10 to 15 years ago.
yeah.
But now I kind of see that shift now where a lot of students are open to having conversations about mental health is a big thing. Uh,
Mm, mhm,
apologetics, even like the intersection between, faith and like politics and all these other conversations, at least in my context, there's more of an openness and a willingness to talk about, which is great.
mhm,
And I think the good thing about 2025 is that whatever questions that they have, they can find answers right away. Um,
mm, mhm,
and answers that support their biases and their positions.
mhm,
But on the flip side, when I have these conversations, I try to encourage my students um, to be careful with certain things that they talk about and the answers that they find online, just because you just
mhm,
don't know the credibility and the sources that they're reading from. And
Yeah.
so I try to give them a guideline and a structure to use, right? It's just, whatever they're learning from online, like have them ask more questions and gain a better understanding of what's really being said. And
Mm,
then based on what's being said, how does it align with our beliefs as a Christian? Um, and then bringing that to trusted people in their circles. And again, that's where
mhm,
discernment comes in. It's like, hey, I heard this online and I'm trying to wrestle with it. I'm trying to think of it
yeah,
as a Christian. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
mhm,
And then from those steps, then they can make an informed decision about whatever topic. And so, again, I don't do this the best, but I try my best to kind of give them that kind of framework instead of just giving them like a pre-packaged,
mhm.
answer to whatever questions that they have. So just kind of,
Yeah.
coaching them, throughout all the conversations and the questions that they have. Because yeah, they're just being inundated with so
Mhm.
much content and so
Oh my
much
goodness.
information, which is a good thing. But then
Yeah.
again, the wisdom and discernment has to come in. Okay, what are some things that I can learn from? And what are some things that maybe I should kind of stay away from and discard? So yeah, just kind of giving them a structure for them to think through.
Yeah, that's what I was hearing was that like the tools or the intentionality that you have is the structure to ask the questions, but it is an invitation for
Hmm.
them when they have the questions to be able to come into this trusted place, come into the structure of how we might ask questions or who we ask these questions with, which is
Yeah,
really cool.
yeah, it's
So
just
it's yeah, it really
yeah,
gives them that autonomy, but
hmm
in a really safe
yeah,
way to do it.
yeah. Yeah, just like you said, it's just can I create that space for them to ask those questions?
Mm.
And rather than me just kind of giving them the answer, I want them to discover it for
Yeah,
themselves, at least in a safe space.
yeah.
But at the same time, there are moments where you do kind of have to be like, hey, like maybe you shouldn't watch those certain things, So I've had certain cases like that too,
Yeah.
where it's like, okay, I just got to tell you, don't watch that kind of stuff. And I think one example of that was I had a couple of students come and they were really worried about the end of the world and the rapture and all that,
Mm,
and
mhm.
that content is really popular because it gets a lot of views, and so they
Definitely.
were really influenced by that, and they were living in fear because of like, hey, like on a certain day this is going to happen. And so I just kind of had to unpack that with them, like, hey, yes, there
Wow.
will be a time when that will come, but we don't know when that day is going to happen. And
Mm,
so that's an isolated case, but in those extreme
mhm.
cases it's like, okay, now I had to walk with them a little bit more, hold their hand and try
Yeah.
to kind of distill that fear that they have at that moment.
Yeah, when we're led with fear is a
Hmm.
completely different e environment and can really like, stop you from critically thinking and
Yeah,
engaging with it. Yeah,
yeah.
so we're gonna wrap up into our final question. Um, in thinking about you've really outlined the tools that you've given your students and the ways that you've set up environments, set up trust with your youth leaders and volunteers. And those are all tools and things that you've given the youth for their own discernment and faith practice. But my last question is for you is what is a discernment tool that you have found most helpful in your call or ministry? What is something that you do for yourself?
uh yeah, that's a good question. I'm still figuring it out too. I really don't have all the answers, so I don't know if this is the podcast that you were expecting, but I think it kind of goes back to what I did share in the very beginning is I think whenever there's some kind of decision or next step that I am thinking about taking is I always allow other people to speak life
Mm,
into me. And I think a lot of it does have to do with culture too. It's just kind of
mm,
inviting people into my life. I think the great thing about Western culture is that it's heavily dependent on the individual, right? It's like, this is,
Mhm.
my life. This is my relationship with God. This is
Mhm,
my
mhm.
calling. This is what I want to do. And I think there is a time and a place for that. I don't want to minimize that, but I think the Christian faith is also corporate. It's not just my relationship, but it's also our relationship with God and with others. And so there is that communal aspect to Christianity, and uh, I try to incorporate that as much as I can in my own life. And it's something that I need to do a lot more because
Mhm.
I tend to fall into that Western thought and that Western culture. It's like, it's
Mhm.
just me, myself, and I. And
Mhm.
so it's just kind of having that self-awareness and just
Yeah.
inviting people into my life and sharing, hey, um, this is what I'm thinking. This is what I think the next step is. What do you think about it? Can you, speak some wisdom? Can you speak some discernment, into my life? And I think that has been so helpful to me. Um, Especially when making, big decisions. I came to Seattle 4 years ago from New Jersey, which is a big decision. And so
Yeah.
like I had to like ask other people. And so, Joe,
Yeah.
one of our mutual friends that connected us, he was one of the people that I talked with about this decision. And so I think that gives me a bit more peace in making certain
Mhm.
decisions. Again, I
Mhm.
don't think you can be fully at peace with everything because I think every decision needs to have an element of faith. It needs to have an element of uncertainty. But
Mhm.
in the midst of all that, when you allow people to speak, it makes it a bit easier. So that's just one thing that I try to implement as much as I can. Again, not the best example. And
No, I think that's a
yeah.
really, really strong example. And I really like the dichotomy that, there is an importance for our individual relationships, but there is also a very clear call in our faith to be the church.
Hmm.
And so, what do these spiritual practices look like with also that at the center? That like we are called into community and called
Yeah.
into relationship. And that should be an important aspect of our questions and our decision making. So
Yeah.
wow. Thank you.
100%.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. I can't thank you enough for sharing your wisdom and your energy, and also your ministry, and just being able to hear about what a special ministry you have with your youth at the church, and I'm just so happy to hear that we have spaces and leaders like you in our church. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I really, really appreciated this. And I love the talk that we had.
Yeah, me too. All right.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.